Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Two quick things before introducing you to my guest. First, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast by clicking on the follow button and also clicking on the bell icon so you're alerted to each new edition of the program. Second, in addition to being the producer of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I've written 4 books, 3 novels, and 1 short story collection. In the episode notes, you will find a short link to my Amazon page and all 4 of those titles. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Christopher Bodmann. He has always been captivated by the power of storytelling. He believes stories exist to inspire, drive action, and ignite passion. This conviction fuels his writing with the hope that his words will one day inspire something extraordinary. For Bodmann, the ultimate fulfillment comes from knowing that his stories have given young readers confidence and belief in themselves. Bodmann is dedicated to crafting fun and engaging stories with relatable characters. He uses fantasy elements to address real-world issues that middle-grade readers might face, aiming to create a meaningful connection with his audience. He is particularly passionate about encouraging middle-aged boys, think in terms of boys roughly from 3rd to 6th grade, to become avid readers. Not an easy task right there. How do you get young boys, or young girls for that matter, to read other than social media platforms? Now, he does this by incorporating gateway topics that resonate with their interests. What's a gateway topic? Well, I got a sense of that, but we'll find out from him. So, gateway topics that resonate with their interests is how he puts it, while also ensuring that his content appeals to all audiences. Now, Bodmann resides in San Antonio, Texas, with his wife and 5 children. Christopher Bodmann, welcome to the program.
Well, hi, thanks for having me, Mike. I guess I'm supposed to say bazinga.
That'll do. But what about having 5 children while trying to find time to write? I mean, maybe they're all off to school and you get your quiet time. How does that work with now? I think it's really a 2-part question, because on the one hand, I can see where your 5 children create tremendous inspiration for you. On the
Right.
other hand, they could also be kind of, Dad, let's play a video game. What are you doing sitting there typing? Come on, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so yeah, 4 of them are college age, so they're off at school. We have 2 at UT,
Uh,
and yeah, 2 older ones.
you look
And
too young to have children that old.
well,
You're doing great.
yeah, I thanks. And then the other one is 6, so he's a kindergartner, and that's a whole new experience. My wife and I went through the whole process with the other kids, and then it's funny how the similarities and differences that 15 years makes in raising a kid. But
Oh, I can imagine.
um,
So you've had, I mean, that's a big spread there.
yeah,
Um, are you done having children, do you think? Or,
yeah, we're done. We've talked about possibly fostering, but we love kids quite a bit. But I think we're definitely out of the business. From our own personal
right.
side of
Snip,
things. But
snip, right?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So, yeah, and I think as far as the kids go, I mean, the older kids were certainly quite an inspiration for me. And in fact, the books that I'm going to be talking about later, actually came out of a conversation with one of the kids that's currently at UT. So he doesn't remember the conversation, but when I signed the book deal, I told him, hey, this is the book that came out of that conversation. And he was like,
And
"What
you are under
conversation?"
contract, kid, right? You're under
Yeah,
contract now,
right.
kid. You just,
Yeah.
just,
So
you just repeat what I'm telling you to say, and we got to
right.
get our stories straight here. You're a character. We're all fictional characters, really. In fact, I was at the Changing Hands bookstore in Phoenix, Arizona, and they had, I should have probably grabbed a t-shirt. I didn't like the colors they had, so I think I'm going to just try to order one in
Mhm.
black, but it said fictional character on the front of it. And I thought, we're
Nice.
all really fictional characters. I mean, we like to think we know who we are, but the whole debate between fiction and nonfiction, I think, is a little bit fatuous, because So much of what we do, we just convince ourselves that things are the way they are, or we are who we are. There's a lot of
Yeah.
fictionalization that goes on there. Now, let me ask you, I'm excited that you're interested in getting middle-aged boys to become avid readers. One of the big frustrations, I think, for any writer today, the writer of
Mm.
books, is that people aren't reading like they used to. Young people aren't reading like they used to. I thought it was a monumental breakthrough that J.K. Rowling
Yeah.
achieved with Harry Potter, and young kids reading books the size of War and Peace was amazing.
Yeah.
So how, and you say by incorporating gateway topics, talk a little bit about why are you targeting that age group just in terms of you really want to get them going with the reading, and what kind of gateway topics do you feel will really trigger them?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know as far as picking that age range. I guess I like to give myself a challenge, but I think this is a time period that reading is really critical for setting up long-term success, and especially for boys in developing their emotional intelligence and their coping mechanisms for life. Reading really lets them, it gives them sort of a safe space to, not just boys, all kids, but boys sometimes get limited in this category. It gives them that safe space to sort of explore those emotions, and in a place where it's fictional, so they don't have to put too much on it, and societally they're not held down from experiencing those emotions. And so especially with boys, all kids at this age, there's so many distractions with technology and other things, but instant gratification and all that stuff. So I really I wanted to build on that age range. And the other thing I find about that 8 to 12-year-old age range is that it's an uninhibited level of imagination that they have.
Mm.
um as kids get older, brackets get put on everything, right? And so that age range, they're completely open. And in terms of gateway topics, again, I'm specifically trying to work on getting boys to fall in love with reading, and so I'm seeking out topics that boys might be interested in. So superheroes. I'm working on a sports book. Video games are an area where I'm looking at. Um, Topically finding places that kids are already interested um, in that area, and so they're going to be more likely to want to pick up a book in that area. And I think the other thing with middle grade books is our target audience is often the parents of the kids, because at an 8 to 12-year-old age range, you can't really directly target those kids, and so you have to be talking to their parents. And so their parents may know that they're really into superheroes, or they're really into basketball or whatever. And so if they see a book that features one of those topics, they're more likely to be encouraged to buy it to help their kids get into reading and find a book that they
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that girls read more than boys,
Oh,
particularly
absolutely.
fiction, and grown women certainly read more fiction than men do.
I heard a
So,
stat I heard a stat yesterday that the adult population in the US, only 50% are regular readers, which is just, it's a horrifyingly low number. But yeah, girls are way more likely to be readers. They're way more open to reading, across genres, and they're open to reading, protagonists that are of a different sex or race or anything. Whereas boys are much less likely um, to read down in age range. So they're not going to read about, if they're 12, they're not going to read about a 10-year-old protagonist. And if they're a boy, they're less likely to read about a girl protagonist or enjoy reading about a girl protagonist.
right.
Whereas, girls are a lot more open to that stuff.
Yeah. The Financial Times out of London came out with an article. It was a serious study about readership, and it has plummeted in the United States. It really
Hmm.
dropped a lot among adults. And so there's a lot of concern around that, that there's just things that you get from reading that you can't get from other forms of
Yeah.
information or entertainment. And I was going to mention that there was a medical school. I wish I had noted it at the time because I wanted to double back and see if they're still doing this. But it was a medical school that was requiring doctors who are in training, who are being educated to read fiction because they felt that empathy, emotional intelligence, bedside manner
Yeah.
comes along when people are reading about characters and the interaction of those characters and reaction of those characters and so on. And I don't know whether that experiment has been a full success or not, whether they're still doing it, but I found it really interesting. And another example of what writing can do. You had mentioned. I think you used I forget what word you used, but empathy or emotional
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Boys.
those are areas where everyone needs to develop that, but I think boys, especially, society kind of pushes them away from um, expressing their emotions. Less in the modern era, but it's still a thing, and
Yeah.
and so
A lot of it's peer pressure. A lot of you
a
get
lot of
picked
it is
on if
peer
you
pressure.
you say something that's freighted with a little bit of emotion, and you get picked on.
Yeah, and so books give kids a chance to try all that stuff on and experience that, and work through those feelings, um, in a fictional setting, and
Hmm.
so they get to explore that without anyone looking over their shoulder. Even better than doing something that is a somebody can watch them, watching a TV show or watch a TV show with them or whatever. The book is it's all in their head. So
Yes, exactly. Well, and that's that one of the arguments I make is that when it comes to the superiority of reading is that you're a co-creator. When you're reading, the author is giving you
yeah,
information, but you're co-creating. You are fleshing those characters out in your imagination. When you watch a movie or a streaming series, the director's supplied everything and you don't get to participate. You are passively watching and he or she has supplied everything. And that's where reading really is much more, I think, develops the imagination much more and gives you more of a stake in the story than just simply
right,
watching it and then saying at
yeah,
the end, well, that was good or it was bad or whatever. The other thing you said was about their unbridled imagination. And there's a
hmm,
guy who wrote a book called A Whack on the Side of the Head. He's a creativity expert. His name is Roger Von Eck. And he talked about, one simple experiment. It was a piece of paper with a black circle, it looked like a black ink circle. And he said, when you ask adults, what do you see there? They say it's a spot of ink on a white sheet of paper. But the kids said, well, it's a rotten egg or it's the top of a telephone pole. And they came up with a
yeah,
whole bunch of different answers that an adult won't say because they're always trying to be so literal about everything and they're always so
yeah,
worried about sounding like they don't want to sound fanciful. They certainly don't want to sound stupid. But the kids are very open to this, and as you're saying, that's a prime time to get that imagination fully developed and roaring
yeah,
and, and,
exactly,
and,
yeah.
and creating things. Now we're going to get to Christopher Bodmann's books. You're probably wondering, okay, you're talking a lot about everything, but Christopher's books. But I kind of want to set this up a little bit because you see what the ambition is here, and you hear some of the things that Christopher's saying, and I feel like that's a good gateway into
Right.
his books and his characters and so on. I did want to ask you one other thing before we get to the books, and that is your wife also a writer, or does she do something entirely different?
She is actually, she does write herself. She's also an artist, and she works in marketing just like I do. And she's, in a lot of ways, I think she's a better writer than I am. But
What's
she's
her
she's
genre or
uh,
style?
she's been working on, actually, a children's book. She's been playing around a lot with illustrations. One of the things that she loves doing, I think loves and hates, but she started when our youngest started going to kindergarten, she started drawing him these little pictures, like just like a little postcard size picture that goes in his lunchbox with just a little note on it or whatever. But they've gotten more and more elaborate. Like she's playing around with watercolors and these like alcohol markers and these gorgeous pictures that she's been playing around with, and so all kind of practice ground for this idea of a children's book. So she's not published anything, but I think she's aspirational, and she's a writer. From a marketing standpoint, she does a lot of writing for marketing purposes.
Not fictional writing.
Not fictional writing.
Okay, and you're a marketing strategist yourself, and I'm going to want to get into that with you as well here in a little bit. But let's talk about your books. How many do you have? And let's talk about Kid Comet. How many books you've got?
Sure.
What all goes on within them. So let me just have you kind of expatiate
Yeah,
on it for a while.
we talk about all this big, high and mighty emotional intelligence and things, and then now we're going to talk about some superhero books.
Yes,
But
yes. But a different kind of
so
superheroes, not
different kind of
Superman,
superhero.
and yeah, you've got different
That's
kinds of
exactly right.
superheroes here.
Yeah. So the current series that I've got out, I have two self-published books. One's a fantasy, one's a science fiction, sort of a STEM focused science fiction book. Those were self-published, but the current trilogy that I've got out there is, it's called Kid Comet. I've got a 6th grade book, 7th grade book, 8th grade book. And yeah, it is it's a different kind of superhero. So the basic gist of the story is this boy moves to a new town with his mom. It's her hometown, and it's this small rural town in northern Illinois that I made up, completely made up. And he's starting 6th grade, and he's really trying to keep his head down at the beginning of the book. Something's happened to him, and he's not doesn't want to put himself out there. He also happens to have cerebral palsy, which is this isn't a story about his CP, but it is a factor in the story. But
Why did you choose to give your character cerebral palsy?
For a couple reasons. One, I really wanted to have some representation that is I find relatively uncommon in the superhero genre. There are quite a few disabled superheroes, but in a lot of cases, their superpowers sort of erase the disability. So you think about the Daredevil, right? He's blind, but with his super senses, he's basically not blind, and so the blindness is kind of a plot device, but it's not really functional. And there's other examples of I think Hawkeye is hard of hearing, but like that doesn't really impact things very much. Of course, there's Professor X, who's in a wheelchair, but even him later on, he's able to use his telekinetic powers to walk. And so there I wanted to have some representation of a disability that isn't just erased by the superpowers, and to kind of give it a little bit of a uniqueness. But I also wanted to I think it gives kids with a disability a place where they can see themselves in this kind of a story, which is not normally done. So,
And then also, I would imagine that the kid reading the story could develop empathy for somebody who
exactly.
has some misfortune
Right.
in his life.
Yeah. So what we find out, and I won't go too far into the details, but spoilers and all that. But what we find out is that the reason why Josh and his mom have moved to this new town is because his dad has recently died in an accident, and Josh, actually, the main character, actually blames himself for uh, his dad's death. I think this is sort of a common. There's some common themes here of dealing with loss, blaming yourself for something that isn't really your fault, and kind of carrying that guilt around with yourself. And so then in the middle of all of this stuff happening, um, Josh finds out that he discovers that he has superpowers, right? So having to deal with all that other stuff, he now has to figure out what it means to be a hero. And the all of that sort of emotional energy gets wrapped up with the villain that he deals with in this first book. Of course, he finds two fast friends, because what is a middle grade book if you don't have a couple of best friends in there?
Mm-hmm.
And together they, figure out how to win the day. And Josh ultimately kind of understands the true mark of what it means to be a hero.
Mm-hmm.
So
This
that's
is
kind
Josh
of
Jacobs Jr.
this is Josh Jacobs Jr. Yeah, he's the main character in the trilogy, and everything in the trilogy is from his perspective.
And
In
then
the
his best
second book,
friends are Mikey and Xandra.
Mikey and Xandra, yeah. So in the second book, the it's still from Josh's perspective, but the focus shifts more to Xandra. She's had some stuff going on with her sister, and the kids actually go off to Chicago and have an adventure in Chicago. I really, I spent 5 years or so during my grad school years in Chicago, and I really wanted to set something there. So that was fun to kind of go back to those stomping grounds and do
Yes.
some stuff there.
Yeah. I've
Um,
done a little of that myself, and it's a kick when you know a
yeah,
place and you're going back. It's like reliving it.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it was really fun going through all that. And then the second book really sets up the third book. This is pretty classic for a trilogy where you can do the first book and never read the other two, but the second and third books are very, very tightly linked together. So the third book really concludes the story that gets kicked off in the second book. Um, and there's a heavy focus on Mikey in that third book, um, and it gets into really delves into standing by your friends, and what it really means to be a friend, and the lengths that you might go to protect that friendship, and all about that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think it creates a nice arc for the middle grade, the sixth, seventh, and eighth grades, and
And the
you
superhero is a
know,
middle grade kid. He's a middle
and yeah,
grade kid. And
yeah,
then he's battling villains and doing good. Now, the villains, is that something you want to keep under wraps? You don't want the listeners to know who the villains are. You want to read
I
that or
yeah, I don't really want to give away too much. I'll say that the villain in the first book is very closely related to all of the emotional challenges that Josh is having. I don't want to say much more than that because
no,
that'll
don't
give
leave
it
it, leave
away.
it, leave it to the
Um,
readers. And you do mention, and I think you've already touched on this, that it's about grief and perseverance and forgiving yourself. You talked about, I think, guilt earlier, and the ability to
yeah,
be able to forgive yourself for what? I mean, we make mistakes all the time, and a lot of times we beat ourselves up over it. Hopefully, we do a little of that anyway, and not just say, "Oh, well, say la vie," So what do
right.
I hurt somebody, but I'm not gonna waste any energy over it. Well, um, but yeah, there is the guilt, even to the degree that a person can come from a bad home and they've got bad parents and they feel guilty that they're the problem. That if I
That
just didn't do, if I would just do things right and not keep screwing up, my parents wouldn't be berating me or hitting me or whatever.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of elements in the books that provide that relatability across a variety of different situations that people might be in. I had one grandmother that bought a book at an event that I was at, and she was talking about how she bought it for her grandson because his parents were going through a divorce. And I was like, I think that is, in this book Josh's dad dies, but I think there's a lot of similarities to the emotional journey that kids go through when their parents get divorced. A lot of similarities, a lot of blaming yourself for something that isn't your fault, or wondering if I did something different, would I have would things have turned out differently? In this case, Josh stands up to some bullies and gets beat up, and his dad is upset about that, and kind of gets in a fight with his mom and storms out of the house and gets in a car accident and dies. And so Josh blames himself for that, even though it wasn't his fault. It had nothing. I mean, it didn't have nothing to do with him, but it wasn't. It was just an accident that happened.
Right.
But it's a situation where I think kids can relate to feeling like they've been in a situation like that. And again, it's that safe zone for them to work through that emotional journey in the pages of a book, rather than and kind of deal with it in that way.
Well, how about the fidelity of the language and the attitudes? You're talking about third to sixth graders. You're well past that age category. We can always think back and try to remember how we spoke. Of course, the vernacular has changed over time. So, is this where your own children provided tremendous input? I mean, just by osmosis, not because you were interviewing them, but you could hear them talk and just start taking notes.
Probably a bit by osmosis. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, that is that was a particular challenge in getting that language right. And I think mostly I was able to land that particular plane. It's hard. And I think, as with any slang, you want to be careful with it, right? Because it changes so quickly. And so I don't want my book to be out of date with language. And then the other thing that happens is if you're a 50-year-old man using the language that a sixth grader uses, it comes across as cringy, and this doesn't come across
how
right.
How does a third grader, speak with this kind of sophistication?
Yeah. So I tried to keep it. Yeah, go ahead.
No, finish that thought, and then I had a follow-up question.
I tried to really keep it as relatable as far as that goes, without getting too far down that path. So,
well, here's the question I want to ask you. There's a level of sophistication when it comes to a third to sixth grader, but that's not the same sophistication that a fully grown and realized adult has got. Do you ever? Is there any level of frustration that you can't make the stories more sophisticated? I mean, you're dealing with real issues here. I'm not saying that, but that
right.
You may want to use language that you feel like I can't do that because the fidelity is not there. Or that's not what a third or a sixth grader speaks like.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's, I wouldn't say a frustration, but it's certainly something that you want to pay attention to. You want to keep an eye on. But I really strive to. I think there are quite a few middle grade authors who dumb down the language too much for this audience, and I don't think it's necessary. I think they're a lot more sophisticated than we realize, and I look to it as a learning opportunity for, I don't go crazy with vocabulary, but I also don't seek out the simplest word choices, right? Because I think that it's an opportunity to throw some words out there that they haven't heard of, that maybe they have to look up or ask their teacher or parent about,
or
what
coin
that means.
something.
Or
Maybe coin something new, maybe. I don't know if you've done that before, but it's like, hey, that's a cool reference.
I don't know that I've done that, but I mean, yeah, that would be cool too. But the other thing is that it gives them that opportunity for context, for figuring that out. And so I strive really hard to. I think it's important. It's more important topically to be relevant than linguistically, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I think linguistically, again, I'm not I'm not seeking out the highest level of SAT words to make sure that I include those in here, but I don't I don't dumb it down as far as the language goes. And
It's the
it is,
imagination, isn't it? The
yeah,
imagination is where you
100%.
is the higher calling for the type of sophistication you're looking for, because kids are very imaginative, as we were talking about earlier. So it really, your real challenge is let's really make this sizzle. Let's make the imagination really bring it into full relief.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you one area where I'm playing around with that I am I am deathly afraid of. I went to this event for it was 75 fifth graders, and one of the kids asked me if I had ever considered writing horror, which I haven't. And part of the reason why I haven't is I find it very challenging, very daunting to figure out where the line might be for this age range for horror, right? Like, what
Mm,
is too scary? I mean, obviously, R.L. Stine has 123 books or whatever out there, and he seems to have hit a sweet spot. But I asked the entire class, I asked all 75 of them, like, how many of you would want to see that? And I think almost all of them rose their hand and said that they would want to see a horror book. So I'm like, okay, now I need to
wow.
seriously consider horror
Yeah.
as a genre. But like, it really is daunting about what are kids afraid of, um and
Right.
how can I sort of tap into that visceral underlying horror element to make it a scary story. And then I think about the
Without triggering
gatekeepers
the parents, right?
with exactly, that's right, exactly where I was going. You got to be careful. I mean, and I've had parents at book events where they ask me, is this book scary? Because that would have been a no for if it had been a scary book. And I don't think I could sell a horror book and say, no, 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 this isn't scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Where were you
So
when you were talking to 75 kids? What kind of an event was that?
this is a school visit, so it's kind of the bread and butter of things that I would like to be doing more of. But going into this was it's a charter school. It's actually right down the street from my house. That it's they gathered up. I met one of the teachers at a local event and talked with her, and she set this up with the other fifth grade class there. And it was great. But I try to go into schools. I'm doing one in a couple of weeks too, in Fredericksburg, going into a school and talking to a group of I think this is fifth graders also that I'm going to talk to. So it's just it's a fantastic age. I mean, I did a Q&A session at the end, and I think we could have just continued to ask questions for hours. Like, they had so many questions to ask me.
Wow,
So
that's good to hear. Good to hear
yeah.
that they're that inquisitive. Um, we mentioned J.K. Rowling earlier, and she's an example, I think, of somebody who you say the kids are more sophisticated than we give them credit for, and I think she nailed that she understood that you
Hmm.
could write. I mean, because adults read those books too, and get lots out of them. The Harry Potter series,
Yeah.
and so it was applicable to young kids all the way up to their parents. So, that says something right there. In the notes I've got here, that you supplied me some notes, and it says here, don't let the cartoonish cover and the superhero premise fool you.
Mhm.
That Kid
Yeah.
Comet is much more than that. It's about, and now I'm repeating myself, but grief and perseverance and forgiving yourself. And it's about friendship and mentors and doing what's right. So what about that? What about the cover? I mean, your covers are quite vivid, and I understand why you would say, "Hey, don't think that this is just a cartoonish thing. There's serious themes
Right.
here." What about the covers? I mean, are you happy with what you've got? Is are you confident that that kind of cover is something that grabs a boy's attention or girls?
Oh,
And
absolutely. I
yeah,
I mean, I've literally that cover. So I have a big blow up of the cover of the first book. It's like a, I don't know, 5 foot tall, mock up of that cover. And I I can't tell you how many times I've been at an event with that sign out and kids do a double take and like make a beeline over to the table, or even parents. I see dads do it a lot too. Um, from the very beginning of writing Kid Comet, I had this vision of the cover looked like a comic book cover. And so that was always in my head. And so Kismet being what it is, I was in the process of going through the editing and the whole process of getting the book made, and we got to the cover part, and the job I was at, one of the designers, I was talking to the creative director, this is an ad agency, and about the book, and he said, oh, this guy Zeke, one of the designers, he's a comic book artist. And I was like, what? And so I went and talked to him, Zeke Saucedo. I checked out his website, and I was like, this is the exact art style that I was envisioning in my head. Like, it's perfect for kids. He's got the comic book chops or whatever. And so I talked to him, and I had him talk to my publisher, and they hired him actually for another book that they were doing. And they were like, if it works out with that book, we'll hire him to do your books too. And so it did, and they did. And so, 3 covers later, um, you know, I
He's on
couldn't be
speed dial.
happier. Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't be happier with the work that he did in the covers, and
Yeah, they look great.
they're just
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
You also make a point that the books are that it can be read on two different levels. The books are deep, but not just superhero stories for kids. You can read them at a surface level and just experience the fun and adventure. Or for the kid who maybe thinks a little bit more differently, a little more deeply, or maybe is going through on a second read even, can get a whole lot more out of it, get more of the humanity out of it.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't literary fiction, and so the goal is primarily entertaining 8 to 12-year-old readers, right? And so that I think you have to go into this with that in mind. If they're not going to enjoy reading the book, they're going to put it down. They're not going to finish. They're not going to get anything out of it. So my number one goal, is to keep them entertained. So I needed it to be, an exciting superhero adventure, which it is. And then, with heart, right? So I think as we've been discussing, the opportunity for kids at this age range, I think with any book really is, to teach some kind of a lesson, or to give some kind of, you know, thought starter, or whatever you want to call it, but get inside their head somehow. And so um that it's like you said, it's got those 2 layers to it. And it could be, and I think it's, I tell parents this, I tell adults this all the time, that I think more adults should read middle grade books, because they're easy to read. They're
Which
short,
is one of the
typically
reasons I
short.
think a lot of adults don't read
Yeah.
fiction. Or the only thing they read is the really hard plotted stuff. There's a murder. Now you're going to try to figure out who killed somebody.
Right.
But when it comes to literature, a lot of times it's like, this is too much work.
Yeah,
I'm having trouble
absolutely. But
tracking or
you're
whatever.
talking about, a 40 to 50,000 word book, which is shorter than pretty much any other genre. And it's a quick read. You can read it in, most middle grade audiobooks are in the like a 4 to 6 hour range as far as listening time. So,
Hmm.
it's a one long car ride on an audiobook, if you're going, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think, and I think there's so much in good middle grade books. There is so much value in them at the emotional level, and being able to just kind of get into the basics of stuff. But even if it's just for having a simple story, it's a great read to pick up no matter what. So
Well, how big is the genre? How big is it? And I don't expect a number, but is it a big genre and is it growing?
my understanding is that it is a big genre. I mean, I think everybody's heard of the young adult genre. This is obviously the range under that. I mean,
Mhm.
I I think it's relatively new, like in the last 20 years or so, new as a distinct genre. Um, and but yeah, I mean, I think it is relatively large, and I think growing. Um, you know, I think there's a lot to it.
Yeah, a lot of kids out there too.
A lot of kids out
And a
there.
lot of parents
Yeah,
who want their kids to read and encourage them. Unfortunately,
right.
I don't think there's as many as there should be, but um, there parents nowadays, I mean, I suppose it depends a lot on income level and all that, but they want their kids to succeed and they want to make sure they're fully developed, that they have a good round education, and that just
Yeah.
doesn't happen without reading. And when they're that young, you want to get them started early with something that they're interested in. Now you're a marketing strategist. So this is interesting because a lot of people who write, they just want nothing to do. They don't understand marketing. They know
Mhm.
nothing about it. And even if they do, they don't want to spend any time at it. And I don't know how much of your time you spend marketing your own books. Is that,
Yeah.
are you spending time doing it? And what are some of the channels you're using?
I do spend quite a bit of time. It's it's mostly social these days. Everything's online, so um, I guess social and in-person events are the two biggest areas that I focus on. I When the books launched, I did a lot of pretty in-depth social media stuff. I've backed off on that a bit in the last couple of months. This has been kind of a whirlwind. The first Kid Comic book came out in April of last year, so it's not like it feels like it's been forever. It's been years and years taken off my life here, but it's really only been a handful of months, or a couple handfuls of months. But yeah, a lot of social media, and then a lot of I try to go to as many events as possible. Um, I love doing live events because I get to really interact with, um, at least the parents, but a lot of times the kids, and it's so awesome to see, the kids' faces light up when I tell them what the book is about, or, you know, it's clear when I tell them what the book is about, and they're like, it's like, all right, well, this is not a sale here, so. But it is so great to interact with, with the kids that are reading these books, because every time I do an event, I get energized, for days afterwards. I'm lit up as far as, just feeling great about what I'm putting out there, and the
Yeah.
impact that I'm potentially having. And it at my scale, it's one kid at a time, but I'll take it. I've been at events, and this is a great feeling, where it's like, oh, I saw that book at my school or whatever, and it's like, wow, that's really cool.
Well, I would
To hear.
imagine that kids are probably word of mouth with kids is probably a bigger accelerant than with adults. That kids, they bring them
Yeah.
into the classroom, they talk about them, they probably share more than adults do. With
Oh yeah.
and the pool of reading that they have available isn't I mean, it's just huge if you're an adult, but if you're a kid, it's a much more, it's a smaller pond, uh,
Yeah.
and it's easy to share it. And I would think
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Absolutely.
if you catch fire with kids who are really enthusiastic, I mean, we saw it with Harry Potter. Again, going back to Harry Potter,
Yeah.
it just just absolutely caught fire.
It's a slow burn for sure. But I get encouraged by stories. The lady that wrote the Lemonade War, I can't think of her name off the top of my head. I probably should know that, but her story was fantastic. Like, she was with a traditional publisher. They published a hardcover. It didn't do it did okay, I guess, but
Jacqueline
it wasn't.
Davies.
There you go.
I just looked it up. Yeah.
It wasn't until the paperback came out, and it really got into kids' hands that it blew up, and now she's like the one book. What is it called?
One
One
book
state.
wonder.
One. No, it's like no. She's written like 6 of these books now. Like one state, one book, basically, where like the state curriculum takes up the book, and every kid
Oh,
in the state reads that book at the same
wow.
time, of like 6 states, and
Uh,
Texas is one of them. So like I can't imagine what her sales look like just based on that. So
Amazing.
like that's the kind of thing. But like her buildup was, it's like that hockey stick, I think, kind of a buildup, right? Where it was slow, 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 and then all of a sudden, it sounds like it kind of took off. But that takes a lot of work. You kind of have to keep working it, and so I'm just trying to do the reps basically on being out there and getting in front of. I'm hoping at some point I'll hit that threshold number of kids where it explodes. The nice thing about middle grade books, with New York Times bestsellers, or like the big adult published books, you have like a 30 to 60-day window after the book launches to chart it, and then it's old news because so many books get published. I think it's something like 11 million books a day or something get published. It's some ridiculous number.
A year, you mean, right?
A year. Yeah, sorry, a year. Yeah. 11
Yeah,
million a day. And that's not counting all of the self-published books. That's just like ISBN numbers, right?
Oh,
So
I see.
um,
Okay. Well,
it is
self-published
it
gets an ISBN number too, though.
well, not necessarily.
No?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, right? So it
Okay.
depends on what the author does. But there's a lot of self-published books that don't ever even go through the ISBN process, and so those aren't even counted in that 11 million. So the volume of books that are coming out every day is ridiculous, to think about, and so it is a nice situation to be in with middle grade, where the the expectation is there's a longer tail on the build up for awareness for it.
Hmm.
So that's nice.
Talk about your writing process. When you're going full throttle, are you a morning writer or evening writer, midday, catch as catch can? How many hours a day? Do you have a particular
Yeah.
location that you write?
So I'm definitely what they call a plotter. Although I do I plot at a broad level, I guess I'd call it. So it, I plan out scene by scene, when I'm planning, but like the scene description might be a sentence, right? So, it's not, I don't delve super deep at the planning stage, at the outlining stage, as far as that goes. But I literally go into the book knowing, the 60 to 80 scenes that I'm going to write, and roughly the order that they're going to be in. Obviously, through the editing process and the writing process, um, that changes, and I have certain benchmarks that I want to reach at certain points. But I have a pretty set up structure of how I plan out the books. As far as the writing time goes, it is more of a catch as catch can. I'm not a full time author, unfortunately, and so I just kind of get in the words when I can. I'm sort of between projects right now. I just finished the draft of my what will hopefully be my next book. Um, and so I'm kind of in that limbo between editing that book and planning out my next book, and then I have this other kind of side project that I've been toying around with that does involve a little bit of writing, but it's not like as devoted. But um,
So, Kid Comet,
I
it's another Kid Comet book you're working on right
it's
now?
no, it's not another kid comic book. This one is a sports book. It's like a near future. I invented a sport It's kind of a cross between like zero G soccer and rugby
Hmm.
and basketball sort of mixed up together. And it's set in like a near futuristic sort of environment. But that's kind of, again, using a gateway topic. I've done like NaNoWriMo before, where you have to write 50,000 words in 30 days.
Yes.
I've done that before, and that's a pace
How
of,
you how useful was that for you?
um
Was it useful or was it just well, interesting exercise, but it's too many words too quickly to
uh let me see. What do I think about that? I'm not sure. I mean, I drafted a complete book doing that process. So I did like a 42,000 word book.
did it survive?
No, it's still lingering. uh
Still needs some work, yeah,
it still
sure.
needs some work. And
It's it,
I
it's
just
inevitable. It's going to be a first draft if you're writing that many words in that short a period of time. But
absolutely.
that's kind of the part of the idea, and also just getting out of your own way, not letting the editor,
Yeah.
just smother your imagination.
Well, and I went into that with a pretty solid plan for that book. So like I knew, pretty much exactly what I was going to write for that. And I actually finished early. I was done a couple days before the end of November, but I was like, I'm at 42,000 words, but like I'm done. Like I'm not gonna just force more words into it. So I'm calling it quits. Um, I, I think it can be helpful. I've heard. I don't know if you're familiar with Erin Morgenstern. She's a fantastic author, but she wrote The Night Circus, and apparently Night Circus was a NaNoWriMo project originally. Um,
I didn't know that.
but
No.
anyway, uh,
But and you do
yeah,
hear about guys like Larry McMurtry who was writing Lonesome Dove, and he got bogged down. And I mean, a big book that won the Pulitzer Prize. It was a big book. He got bogged down on it, and he turned around and wrote a book called The Desert Rose about a woman in, I believe, in Vegas, and he wrote that in like 2 or 3 weeks.
yeah,
It just came to him. Now, it's not his best work, but
sure,
he was able to crank it out in a he found a channel there, cranked it out in a short
yeah.
amount of time. I mean, it can and does happen. Um,
Well, and I wrote the third book of Kid Comet. I wrote very quickly. I had about 40% of the second book was already kind of drafted when I
mhm.
signed for the trilogy, and I was able to plot out book three and finish out book two, and I finished both of those books in like 4 or 5 months. So those were, pretty rapid. I mean, they had been banging around in my head for a year and a half, while I was waiting for book one to get picked up. But um,
That's really helpful, don't you think, when something incubates that long and it's
yeah, absolutely.
developing, even without you necessarily knowing it's really developing, and then you sit down to write, and it's like, wow, this stuff is
Yeah,
really pouring out of me.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and I was stuck on the second book, and I was kind of, I had kind of put it aside for a long time, and I was just kind of not sure if where it was going, and I realized it's because I only have half a book here. So I was able to finish out that book, and that led directly into the third book, and the plot for the third book just kind of fell out of it like so effortlessly.
Now, that's a
That
beautiful thing when that
Yeah,
happens.
well, and that happened with this current project that I'm working on that I just finished the draft for. I was struggling and struggling and struggling with the outline and trying to figure out like how does it end and where does, and like once I figured it out, within 30 minutes I crafted a completely new 60 scene structure for the whole thing in like 30 minutes. Like it just flowed right out of me. Because I fixed like two or three things, and I was like, that's it. And I was able to knock it all out. And it was like this, and then this, and then this, and then this. So, you know, when it's working, I can be fairly prolific and get in that, 1,500 words a day. I tend to not set a goal for myself because uh with my schedule, I don't always know when I'm going to get to write. So like you said, it's catch as catch can. And my philosophy is, if I if I write 50 words a day, eventually I'm going to get up to 50,000 words. It just may take me a long time. But
Everybody's
I
got their process.
yeah. Yeah.
And some of it has to do with circumstance, like, hey, I'm a full-time worker and so on. There's a lot of superhero movies out there. What are the prospects that and this is an impossible question, I realize, Christopher, but I'm going to ask
Boy.
you anyway. What are the prospects that one of your books could be translated to the silver screen? Have there been, do you think, spend time thinking about it? Have there been
I
any bites of that kind?
I do spend a lot of time thinking about it. I actually would love to turn it into a, cartoon, like a series. I think it would be a great series. I've approached a couple of studios about it, and have, either gotten crickets or no's. But I it it's certainly, um, it certainly would be a dream come true to see this go up
Yeah.
on a screen somewhere, silver screen or small screen, whatever.
And I mean, check me on this, but I think in terms of third to sixth graders as being big moviegoers, and depending on the age, their parents are going with them. That's a lot of ticket sales.
Yeah, it is a lot of ticket sales. Yeah. Well, in one of the science fiction book that I self-published, I did a book club thing with some kids on that, and that was one of the questions they asked me was, "Is this going to be a movie?" I was like, I hope it would be a movie, but probably not.
Well, one of the
Yeah,
most exciting things going on these days, and I can't even count the number of times I've mentioned it on this podcast, is that when you look at the streaming platforms and all the different shows that they've got, so many of them come from novels.
yeah.
So there's
Oh
never
yeah,
been a better
absolutely.
time to get to the screen as a novelist or a writer of some kind, and because they're constantly looking for content, and a lot of these are not authors who are particularly whose names are recognizable or even their books are big sellers, but the content appeals to a director who turns it into
Yeah.
something and comes up with comes up with the screen development and convinces convinces the whether it's Netflix or Hulu or
Yeah. Well,
Paramount
if
that
any if
this is
if
good.
any of if any of your listeners are, a producer or a director, I'm open. I'm sure you can get my contact information from, the show notes, and reach
I
out to
will
me. I
have
would love to help work on a project like that.
the amount of exploration we've done during this conversation, they should know at this point, yay or nay. And for our listeners, the URL to Christopher's website is in there, where you can go to that site and learn more about him. I was going to ask you one other thing, Christopher. Are you a football fan?
Not actually particularly into any sport, really. I
Do you know who
do.
Josh Jacobs is?
Uh, no, is he a football player?
He's a star running back for the Green Bay Packers, and you probably
That's
had
funny.
how old is your Josh Jacobs Jr.? How many years ago did you publish?
Uh, let's like probably 3 years ago when I first came up with that
Well,
name.
you probably predated him just a little bit. Obviously, he was around,
Yeah.
but I don't think he was a star yet. I think it's only been the last couple seasons not that that really matters, except that kids, if they're football fans, I mean, actually, just the association could actually make them feel like, hey,
Well, Josh Jacobs, the football player, if you're listening, reach out. Maybe we can set something up, a collab or something.
yes, yes. There's always synergy to as long as a
Right?
person's got a imaginative mind, the synergy will present itself
Yeah.
eventually. And you put get
That's
two
funny.
guys putting their heads together, and it
You
can
never
work.
know.
Um, so again, my guest Christopher Bodman, you've heard the story and the Kid Comet series, but he's moving. That's not the only thing he does. But that's really exciting. Christopher, I appreciate you coming on the program and sharing all this information with us. And I wish you best of luck with future endeavors and getting a long a shelf full of books at the local bookstores and a streaming series or movie and so on.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks a lot for talking. It's been a blast.